Hey there! Welcome to Middle Age Crazy, the show that proves being an adult doesn't have to suck. With your host, Chuck T.
Hey there, what's going on? Welcome to the show. It's the Middle Age Crazy Podcast, and we are the show that proves being an adult does not have to suck. I'm your host, Chuck T, and I want to remind you that we drop new shows on the 1st and 15th of every month, and we're all about talking to middle-aged people that have interesting jobs, careers, and hobbies. And a big thanks to my last guest, Mr. Eddie Pence. He's a hilarious comedian and podcaster. You got to go check out his shows. He's got 3 different podcasts that go on a regular basis. They're hilarious. And he's got a great fan base on Twitter. His fans really helped me get the word out for last time's show. I got to give a shout out to the Twitter guys, Eddie Pence's fan club, Drunk Eddie's Thoughts, and Ghost Ham Eddie. Thanks a lot for helping me out, guys. And what a crazy week it's been. I'm dropping the show a little later in the day than I normally do. It's because my wife has been deathly ill. She has the classic influenza and has been in bed since around Wednesday. I mean, it really kicked her ass. I've never seen anybody as sick as this. So I haven't had a ton of free time, been dealing with the kid and all that jazz, so we're going to wrap up this intro really quick and get to the show. Can't forget the housekeeping, though. Find us on social media at MiddleAgePod. Send us an email at middleagecrazypod@gmail. And if you're feeling funky enough, give us a call on the hotline, 515-478-3412. Say something stupid, I'll play you on the show. Now on to my guest, Jared McClurg. He's an old friend of mine going all the way back to high school. He's been in the television business for almost 20 years as an editor and producer. He's done shows I'm sure you've seen. He's worked with the guys from Jackass, Top Chef, to Ridiculousness. He's worked for a bunch of different shows. After quite a bit of time in Los Angeles, he's recently moved to Nashville to open a bakery with his wife. But he's still producing on the side. So the guy's got a cool story. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's talk to Jared. Here we go.
I'm Jared McClurg. I'm 42. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm a television editor, but I also own a bakery with my wife.
It's time for the interview, talking to one of my old buddies, Jared McClurg from the Quad Cities. I've known him forever. He's a Hollywood man now via Nashville. Jared McClurg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. What's up? Good to be here.
Appreciate you taking the time. When I was starting to get this show together, you were definitely one of the first people I thought of because you got an interesting story as far as a career would go, because you've been working in the film and television industry, but you're also opening a bakery, or you have a bakery, correct?
Yeah, man. It's a weird, convoluted journey that I've been on for these many years. But yes, my wife and I own a business called the Shortbread Shop. It's a wholesale cookie factory, basically, here in Nashville. And then we sell all across the country and grocery stores and things like that. It's mostly her brainchild. I just kind of help out.
Right on. What's the website or the social media handles for that if they want to check your bakery out?
People can go to www.theshortbreadshop.com, and there you can look, peruse, let your mouth water, and even purchase stuff, and we ship all over the country.
Fantastic. You're the only person I know that owns a bakery.
Yeah, me too, actually. I don't know anybody else that owns a bakery.
And you're also the only guy I know that is into what I would consider film and TV production. You know, I know a few people have taken a stab at acting. We've obviously interviewed one of them. People that have done music, all kinds of different stuff. But you're involved in what one would call post-production, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
For the editorial side of things.
Okay. So for our listeners that aren't super familiar with the production of video or film, what have you, give us a little background. What is post-production all about?
So whenever you make a TV show or a movie or a commercial or anything like that, there's 2 sides of it. And the first side is production, which is the actual shooting of the movie or television show. It usually has actors or whoever the performers are. And then after that is post-production, which is where you take all the elements of the actual shoot and put them all together with music and sound effects and things like that. And that's the finished product. So that's what you end up seeing on TV or in the theater or wherever. So that you can kind of think about it in those terms, like there's production and there's post-production.
So fix it in post. I've heard that plenty of times. How easy is it normally to fix it in post?
I mean, it just depends on what it is, you know. You can't like change somebody's clothes in post or something like that. I mean, I guess you could if you had a lot of money, but I think a lot of times it's just said as a joke, like on set. Yeah, we'll fix that in post. And really, you can't really fix a whole lot. You know, you want to start with good material to begin with. You know, you want to start with a good script or, you know, good performances, things like that. And that's really what makes post-production job a lot easier.
And speaking of the job itself, whenabouts did you start thinking about it? Because, I mean, I remember, obviously, I've known you forever. Back in high school, we never really talked about making television shows. Possibly, bullshit albums that never happened, but never TV shows. When did you get the idea that you wanted to get into making TV and film?
I actually I fell into it a little bit. I wanted to study film in college, but my GPA was not good enough because at the University of Iowa, where I went to school, you had to have like a 3.0 to get into the film program, which was probably like 15 people total in the whole program.
No shit.
And so I didn't really do that, but I thought, well, what's the next best thing that I can do that kind of deals with the creative aspect of, you know, performance and things like that. And so I decided to major in theater, which I didn't know anything about theater. I didn't do any theater in high school. I didn't know really any plays or anything like that, but I kind of leaned that way because I thought, well, this is kind of film and TV adjacent. At least it'll give me kind of an idea of, you know, working with directors and writers and, you know, things like that. And so I ended up majoring in theater and then really not doing anything with it after graduation. I just moved to LA and kind of stumbled my way into television production as a career, I guess, and worked my way from there.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, because I was supposed to be at school, I was supposed to be an audio video major, like they had an official major for it. But there was some bullshit test you had to take, and I could never pass it for some reason. Some aptitude test, because I got terrible grades in college, right? And so I ended up taking, just having a general communications degree, whatever. But every one of my electives ended up being all the classes for the major. So I pretty much had it. I just didn't have it in name. But I couldn't get into it either.
Right. On paper, right. How many times did you take the test?
Oh, like 3 times. Oh, man, my old man was so pissed. But by that time, I started working. I was working at a radio station and stuff. I'm like, oh, man, I was getting some real-world experience, so I didn't mind. But, yeah, I could never get into it, so I get it, dude.
Hey, I did that, too. We were both on the college radio, right?
I was on college radio.
You actually were on a real radio station. I was on a college radio station.
No, I was on a couple different real radio stations. And I'm dying, and I can't spoil it here. I'm dying to tell the story of me getting fired. But we're from the radio station in the middle of my show. We're easing into that story sometime here on the show. But college radio, oh crap, man! Me and Jeremy I think we got fired from college radio too.
I don't know if I got. I don't remember if I don't think I got. I think I just quit. But I did have some fun times on college radio.
Well, hell yeah.
Did you ever have those like late night shifts on college radio?
No, we had the Jeremy and I had the Badass show. We had the 6 to 8 on Thursdays, so we had the get ready to go out to the bar crowd, and so it was kind of.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, we kind of lucked out that way. And
I had a similar shift, but I had to work my way into it because I started out like overnight, like at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. And I'd have my buddies call in and pretend like they were calling from Johnson County Jail and request songs like on the radio and stuff like that.
Really?
And just like interview people who like didn't exist. Yeah. And then I would get like, scolded by my station manager and be like, you can't do that. Don't do that ever again. And then I would just do stupid stuff on the radio in the middle of the night because I didn't think anybody was listening. So apparently my station manager might've been the only one that was listening.
See, you and I was such a smaller school, like we immediately got a decent slot. I didn't have to do overnights until I was working for a real radio station, but we got in a bunch of trouble too because we had a buddy of ours that would call in and do his traffic report, and he'd call in for like the first time he called in from Hy-Vee and was bagging on a bunch of stuff, and they were currently a sponsor or something, and we got in a bunch of trouble. but you know,
I believe it. Knowing you, I believe it. You actually, I don't know if your listeners know this or not, but you spearheaded us starting a radio station in high school that played throughout our high school. And I don't know if you've talked about this on the show or not, but
slightly.
When I feel lucky enough to have been a part of that. So
I was going to bring that up because I talked about it with Lucas Hunt because he was my very first radio partner when he was on. So we talked about that.
That's right. You know, I did listen to that show, and I remember you guys talking about it now that you said that. Yeah. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun doing that.
Oh yeah, high school radio, Jesus. Okay, so
you got kicked off there too, if I remember correctly, right? You got kicked off for saying something or other.
I said,
what was it that you said?
Knuckin' Futz. I said Knuckin' Futz. But also, we had gotten in trouble because Luke and I used to act like we were doing shows from the bar, from Al and Jerry's. We'd play the sound effects that sounded like we were hanging out at a bar and shit. So, dude, they were all over my ass all the time. The Howard Stern of a small Iowa high school.
Yes. Yes. That was fun, man.
Jesus.
That's what got me started. That's what got me started. Wanted me and made me kind of want to do it in college too. So
I'm so
thanks for getting me involved so early on the radio side.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad you never attempted to do it as a career because I quasi did. And dude, I don't want to be one of these guys, but the money's not good in radio. At least it wasn't good in the 90s. I can only imagine how bad it is now. So.
Yeah, but, you know, I think, I'll speak for myself, but I have a face that really lends itself to radio.
Yeah. That hairline ain't helping you out either.
Yeah, no, not really. Definitely not anymore.
All right, well, fuck radio. We're talking about making TV shows and shit. When did you go to L.A.? When you're like, fuck it, I'm moving to L.A.? Because I know after school you were in Minneapolis for a little while, but when did you say, screw it, I'm going to go make TV shows in L.A.?
Yeah, I kind of went up to Minneapolis and dicked around for a couple of years and bartended and just kind of partied and just had fun. I had a couple of friends that lived there, and Minneapolis is a great town.
Minneapolis rules.
I had a lot of fun there, met a lot of good people, and then oddly enough, I always pegged the decision to go to LA on September 11th, believe it or not.
What?
You know, I mean, yeah, we can all remember that, but that was really the moment where I was like, you know what, you're not really promised anything, and you know, I got to do it. It's time. And so shortly thereafter, I think September 11 happened, and then that following May, I moved to LA.
No kidding.
So that was, yeah, it was one of the things that really kind of kickstarted me to just be like, I got to do it. Let's do it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And started making plans shortly thereafter. You know, it's weird. It's weird to think of that, but that's definitely what spurred it on.
Well, when you headed out, because when I moved out west to Phoenix, I had absolutely no plan. I had no place to live. I had no jobs. I had nothing. It was a total fucking dumb move. Did you have anything lined up in LA, or were you just the Midwest kid with a few $100 in his pocket? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I didn't have anything lined up. I kind of just packed my old crappy like Honda with everything I owned and drove out there. I did have some friends. I had a couple of friends out there, and another guest on your show, actually, who's another good friend of mine, Kurt Burrell. We kind of teamed up and met another guy, our friend Scott, and he was already out there, and he did the legwork on getting us a place to live and set us all up and stuff like that. So it's not like I just drove out there and was like, you know, looking at the classifieds trying to find an apartment or anything like that. We kind of were set up, but I didn't have a job or anything like that. So I knew some people that worked in post-production and TV and stuff like that, and thought, well, maybe they can help me, you know, get in somewhere or whatever, and, you know, run those connections and see what happens. And so that's what we did. So we moved out there, and I probably kicked around for a few months. I don't think I got a job. I think I landed there in May, and I got my job probably in that fall, maybe.
Okay.
So I was really kind of just burning through my savings for like 4 months, maybe.
Did you know anything about editing and producing? Besides, I mean, you majored in theater. No. That's a stretch to TV. I mean, did you know anything about the trade?
No, it's totally different. And so I think that the get-in point, like the starting point is to become a production assistant, or in my case, because I knew people that were in post-production, a post-production assistant. And basically that's just like a gopher.
Yeah.
You run errands for people and, I don't know, tidy up, and you're just kind of like, a do-it-all kind of jack of all trades kind of person. You didn't get paid anything. You did a lot of runs around town with a car, like you had to have a car. And, that's what I was looking to get into, and then just work my way in from there. And so I interviewed for a lot of jobs. I had a couple of friends that worked on network shows. One of my friends, Frank, was actually a post-production assistant on Seinfeld. Nice. So he was like running scripts around and stuff like that for Seinfeld, and doing that whole thing. And him and another buddy of mine kind of set me up on, to go on interviews with network shows. And I always had good interviews, but then it always came down to like, hey, you're one of the final guys, like I think you're going to get this gig, it's like this new show on NBC or whatever. And then I would get the call and be like, yeah, we had to hire somebody else. And come to find out it was like the executive producer's nephew that needed a job, or, like I lost
Shocker.
Probably 4 or 5 jobs like that to like, nepotism type thing.
Well, so, of course.
Learned that lesson. Yeah. I mean, that's a thing. That's a thing in Hollywood for sure.
So did you start, like, when you first got there, did you get any regular Joe jobs like tending bar or waiting tables, or did you just go right into, I'm not going to work until I at least got an industry gig?
I don't think I had a lot. I did have one job bartending at this weird Mexican restaurant in Beverly Hills. It was like this upscale, like super upscale, like Mexican restaurant. And I think I worked there like 3 nights. And then
like total?
I called back. He's like, yeah. And they were like, call back to see when we put you on the schedule next. And I called back and they were like, yeah, we don't really need you anymore. Like, I don't know what happened. But yeah, that was the only other job I really had out there other than TV work. So
well, that's
I
cool.
I didn't have to do a lot of that stuff. Didn't have to struggle that much, I guess, hustle that much,
See,
I jumped into a TV job.
I scored a handful of freelance, like PA gigs on the production side of things when I first got to Arizona. I'm actually in, I have no idea what company made these, but I'm in a couple after school, like special from some like Bible camp religious company that made these videos that I ended up being a PA on and had to be in the background. So word to Jesus or whoever's watching those. Yeah. Oh, I didn't.
What are those? Do you have copies of all that stuff?
No, I have not. I have nothing, man. Because this is like when I moved to Arizona, it was 01. I didn't even have a computer or anything. You know what I mean? So, but I had a bunch of jerk off fucking PA gigs, and didn't really go anywhere. So, what did you do as far as what was the first one? What was the first gig that you got that was worth a shit?
My first gig was on a show called Girls Behaving Badly.
I remember that show.
And it starred Chelsea Handler was one of the leads on the show.
Okay.
It was before that she was actually like Chelsea Handler that she is now, but it was like a hidden camera prank show, and I just kind of got hooked up with these guys and interviewed with them, and we hit it off, and they were looking for people, and it worked out. And everybody that worked on that show was kind of young and new, a little wet behind the ears. But it was, at the very beginning kind of that like reality TV heyday. And I just started as a tape dubber. I came on as a post-production assistant and a tape dubber when they had tapes. They don't have tapes anymore.
I used to, when I worked at the TV station, at the news station, I had to dub tapes with the fucking knobs and shit. I had to edit tapes with the knobs and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I basically just had to copy every tape that came in from the field, and being a hidden camera show, they shot a lot of stuff.
Oh my God, that's so
I had just a stack of tapes, and I spent all day long just recording tapes all day long. Funny thing was that I didn't have an office. there was this area of the building that we were in. It was like the first floor or like the basement kind of. And they were like looking for a place to put me. And they're like, well, how about we just put you around here? And we walk around the corner and it's like the break room with like a sink and a coffee machine. And I'm like, this isn't an office. They're like, yeah, you can set up the dub rack right there and tape your tapes. So I was sitting in a corner of this room, and I was dubbing tapes, and people would come and get coffee. And so like I talked and BS with everybody on the show because everybody would have to come get coffee at some point in the day, and that's where I was. So,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so that was my first taste of Hollywood, is working in a break room, basically dubbing tapes.
Sweet. Okay, so what's the next step after tape dubber? Where do you go from there?
I know, right? You can only go up, right?
I would assume so.
So what happened was that we had a first season, and it was pretty successful. It was on what network? It was on Oxygen Network, I think, which is no longer a network. But
Oxygen.
We got a first season.
Was that the Oprah channel?
I think she had something to do with it.
Okay.
But I don't really remember.
Right
but
on.
What happened was that we got picked up for a second season. And back then what happened was that during the second season, everybody usually would get a bump, like a pay raise.
Okay.
And so we got picked up for a second season, and, you know, everybody was getting pay raises or whatever. So I went in to the executive producers and I was like, hey, you know, I think I was making like $500 a week or something like that. I mean, for as much as we worked, I don't even think I was making minimum wage at that point. And, so I go in and I'm like, hey, you know, I was thinking maybe I could get a raise, maybe, you know, like $50 a week. I didn't know what to ask for. And the one executive producer was like, no, absolutely not. And I was like, okay. I just kind of took it. I was like, all right. And I was like, I thought that was weird because I knew that other people were getting raises. So then I was like really bummed out. And I started talking to people around the office. They're like, yeah, dude, you don't need to stay here. Like, don't stay here. Like, go get another job. And so I was working with a friend of mine who was an assistant editor. Her name's Jennifer Welsh. And she had worked on Jackass. So she knew all the guys that were doing Jackass and all that stuff. And Jackass wasn't really in production at that point in time, but she knew the executive producer and the post producer and all this other stuff. And so she's like, hey, you should meet these guys. Like, you know, you'd hit it off. Like, you know, they're cool dudes, and I think they've got stuff going on or whatever. So she hooked us up, and I went and met with the executive producer and the post producer, and they were indeed doing a movie, a spring break reality movie done by Mike Fleiss, who is the guy that does The Bachelor. And they were like, hey man, when can you start? I was like, I don't know, next week.
Yeah.
And I was still working at Girls Behaving Badly, and they were like, cool, you start Monday. We'll see you then, you know, like whatever. And so I had to go back to the office and tell my executive producer that I quit. Basically, it was like Thursday, and I was like, yeah, so I'm not coming in next week. And he was like, you'll never work for me again, ever. And like, he just like threw a little hissy fit.
Oh, sweet.
And I was like, okay, whatever, you know. I didn't really care at that point because he didn't give me a $50 raise. All he had to do was give me a $50 raise. That's it. And I probably would have stayed for as long as he wanted me to.
Scumbag.
And he didn't. And yeah, just whatever. Funny story is that I ended up working for him a couple of times after that as an editor after I became an editor. And we kind of hit it off. And,
never say never, right?
It became cordial again. Yeah, it's so weird. Hollywood's a weird place.
Okay, so
but,
you're connected with the Jackass folks. So what is the first project with the Jackass folks?
It was the executive producer Trip Taylor from Jackass, and then the post supervisor Volney Howard. His name is Volney, and he's a fourth. And everybody we ever said, you know, Volney, and they're like, what, Varney? You know, like they would always mess his name up. So he has one of those names or whatever. But
yeah.
So it was those two, and they were running all the post-production for this movie, and I forget what the name of the movie was, but it was a reality spring break movie. You know how MTV had The Real World?
Yeah.
And MTV had this idea. Well, it wasn't MTV's idea because Mike Fleiss had the same idea, but it was this follow these kids around on spring break, as they go down to Mexico and go on spring break. And so he had a movie, and MTV had a movie at the same time. So we were racing to kind of beat the MTV movie to theaters or whatever. And I don't know if anybody ever remembers either of these movies, but the MTV movie ended up coming out first, and it was just a shit show.
I can imagine.
Just trash. It probably sold 10,000 tickets total. It was awful. And so I think they shelved the movie that I was working on. And I moved on. I went on to Wild Boys after that, which was the Jackass spinoff with Steve-O and Chris Pontius doing crazy stuff with wild animals,
Dude,
which was
I
an
love that
absolute
one.
blast. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had. Yeah.
Okay.
It was so great. So meeting those guys on that shitty spring break movie kind of propelled me into the world with all the Jackass crew, who I love. They're it's just like a family. They're so fucking great. I love those guys.
So you go from this working on the movie because you get kind of into the group and they connect you with this movie, and your first major assignment's Wild Boys. That show was fucking crazy. I used to love that shit. Those guys, the shit they were doing, the animals, man, they're fucking nuts.
I know. It was really something. It was this idea of, what if Jackass met Wild Kingdom, and it became that, and it was just, over the 4 seasons that it just got honed into this. It's a really, really good show. And if you have the inkling to go back and watch it, it's really funny. It still stands up. I watch it every once in a while. It's great. It was a lot of fun working on it too.
Most of the Jackass stuff, it was obviously, it's all dangerous, right? Because they do stupid stuff and they hurt themselves, right? But it's different when you got wild animals, man. Some of the shit they did, I'm like, that. Even if they had the old dude Manny with them, I'm like, that dude, okay, he's, I guess, there to save them if something fucking fucked up happens. But I'm surprised one of them didn't get eaten by something. They did some nutty shit. Yeah,
totally. No, and that's the whole thing is they'll risk life and limb to entertain. You know what I mean? It's just. They love the hurting themselves and putting themselves in dangerous situations, and it's funny, it comes out to be really funny because you or I wouldn't do any of that, or most people that are watching wouldn't do that sort of thing. So they were fortunate enough to travel around the world and put themselves in dangerous situations that became hilarious, which was great. It was a lot of fun.
What were you doing on that show? Were you out and about with them, or were you working on the material once it came back and putting the show together? What were you doing?
We were putting the show together. I wasn't an editor at the time. I was, I guess I was the post coordinator, which is kind of just a step above the post PA. So I didn't have to go on runs and do all that stuff, but kind of dealing with schedules and mixes and color correction and doing the final stuff and dealing with the schedule and music that goes in the show and things like that. So kind of more of a clerical position in post than anything.
Okay.
But that was the first 2 seasons, and then the second 2 seasons our post supervisor couldn't work on the second 2 seasons, so I became the post supervisor, which is a lot more responsibility and kind of overseeing the finishing of the show and delivering it to the network and all that stuff. So, I kind of moved my way up like that through that show.
And there was 4 seasons, Wild Boys?
Yep.
Okay.
There was 4 seasons.
Did you work on any of the other projects that they did, TV shows or movies or anything? I can't remember.
I worked on, there was always stuff going on in the office. So they would be doing DVDs and other stuff like that. So when I was working on Wild Boys, we did a whole repackaging DVD set of the original Jackass episodes.
Okay.
And I think I oversaw post on all of that stuff too while I was there. So I did that, and there was some side projects and DVDs and stuff like that. But that was going on, and then right after Wild Boys ended, Johnny Knoxville had become kind of he kind of became a player in the last season or two of Wild Boys, and that kind of spurred on Jackass 2, the movie.
Okay.
And so we kind of all finished Wild Boys and then moved on to Jackass the movie. And that's when the original post supervisor, Volney, he came back, and then I had asked if I could be the assistant editor on the movie, because I had gone and took classes to learn the Avid, which is the machine that you use to edit and all that stuff. And so I had on MTV's dime had gone back and learned all this stuff and kind of begged for a job as the assistant editor, and they gave it to me. So I was assistant editor on the second movie, Jackass #2.
Okay, and I want to nerd out a little bit as far as the knowledge base, the skill set, and the equipment here. So that was I was trying to get to that. So when do you decide, okay, I need to learn how to actually do the video editing? Whereabouts are you when you want to decide, and then how do you start learning how to do it?
A friend of mine that I had met on Girls Behaving Badly, actually, the first job that I ever had, he was the one that I kept in touch with him, and he was an editor on Girls Behaving Badly, and he was kind of always prodding me that he's like, dude, you should go into editing, like start as an assistant, like work your way up or whatever. And he's like, if you ever have any, like, you want to talk tech or talk like the shop or whatever, he's like, I'm always here or whatever. And so he kind of like prodded me into it. And I found out that MTV, because we were working for MTV on Wild Boys, they had this program where they would pay your classes. If you wanted, you just signed up, and then they would pay for you to go to editing school to learn how to use the Avid.
Okay.
And so I took advantage of that while we were working on MTV, and it was like a 2-week course or something like that. And you go and like every night and learn the Avid. So I got kind of lucky because they canceled that program shortly after I completed it. So I got kind of in under the wire there, but yeah, so that's how I got familiar with the machine. And then from there, it's just logging time on the machine. So while I was a post supervisor, I would always be like, hey, can I mess around with the Avids or whatever? Because I had just learned all this stuff. And so I was kind of honing it in. Like I would stay after at night and, like digitize stuff and, play around with the Avid and try to find my way around and whatnot. So that's how I got into that.
All right, cool. Because that's no joke. The Avid's a kind of a beast. That was the first thing I ever edited video on. I'm a Premiere guy now, and I don't obviously do much editing to begin with. But Avid's no fucking joke, man. Would you consider that? Is that the industry standard right now?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think for a little while there was some back and forth between Final Cut and Avid.
Okay.
And what happened was that Apple never really cared about Final Cut, I don't think. They just wanted to sell computers. So they offered it as a pro editing software, but nobody really used it. You could always tell if you were going to go for a job interview and they were using Final Cut, that's not a place that you wanted to really be. Because number one, they probably paid less. And number two, it was probably just an absolute circus of from a media management, from workflow aspect, just a nightmare. So you didn't really want to deal with that. So Avid, I would say 99% of TV shows and stuff like that, movies are on Avid for the most part.
Okay. And so you're obviously, like you said, you learn how to use that program. And so what are you doing is if you're the assistant editor, I forgot, assistant editor, whatever you said you were, what does that actually entail? What are you doing?
So the assistant editor is really, their job is basically to manage all the media and build sequences and things like that for the editor to then edit down.
Okay.
So in a lot of these reality TV shows, a lot of stuff that I've worked on is multi-camera. So basically what you'll do is you'll take all of the cameras that shot and group them together so that on the screen I can look and shuffle through all the cameras and they'll all be at the same time code. You know what I mean? So you can look at all the different angles as an editor and tell which is which. And that's the assistant editor's job, is to put that all together. And then, exports and things like that. It's more of like I don't know what you would call it. What would you call it? This, like, because you're not like actually helping. I mean, you are helping to edit, but you're not really editing per se. You're more of just like managing all of the material.
Are you making the decisions on what shots and what media is being used?
Not as an assistant editor. That's more of the job of the editor. So as an assistant editor, you're basically like a computer nerd. Like if there's problems with the system for an editor, you know how to fix it. If they get error problems, like you're just kind of like the tech dude. You know what I mean? You're kind of like making sure all the media is in the right place for them and all that. And then, importing music and exporting cuts and things like that.
So you're providing all the elements you're helping organize all the elements they're going to use to edit the show together.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. All right. Is that the only role you had as far as your association with Dick House and the Jackass guys and all that stuff? Or did you do some different shit?
I mean, aside from the post-supervising and stuff like that, that's pretty much where it ended with that. I never made it to editor. I never really wanted to assistant edit. I just wanted to edit. But it was kind of the stepping stone into editing.
Yeah. So
my goal was always like, as soon as I was an assistant, I was like, I'm looking for a way out. I want to get to edit, as soon as possible. So that's what my goal was, is really to get out of that. And a lot of times as an assistant too, you worked overnight. A lot of times you would go in at 6 and work until 3 or 4 in the morning, and a lot of times you were by yourself. So it was, it was graveyard shift, and it was just kind of like lonely, And I mean, I got used to working the day side where you're like around everybody and all the editors and everybody in the office and things like that. And working at night by yourself it gets pretty lonely. And so I knew pretty much right away that I was like, I don't want to do assistant editing. I have no interest in doing assistant editing. So I wanted to move into editing as soon as I possibly could.
You got any good Jackass crew stories you can share that's worth sharing?
I wasn't in the field with them a lot, so I don't really have like those kind of stories, but
I'm sure you saw some. I mean, if they didn't do it in the fucking office, you saw some crazy shit on the tape, right?
There was always crazy footage, but I don't, like I've seen so much of it. It's just kind of like, I don't know. Nothing really shocks me, but there was some the office in and of itself was a crazy place to be, because at the time we were kind of secluded. We were in this office over in Burbank, and we were just kind of on our own by ourselves. We didn't share an office with anybody else or anything. And so one of the big things to do was like find like the grossest pictures on the internet that you could possibly find and post them around the office. So all around everybody's office in the whole place had like the most disgusting pictures. There was a lot of dicks, like a lot of just nude dudes like around. Like you would go into your office and there would be like 3 pictures of naked guys in your office. And part of it was you didn't want to take them down because you're like, well, I don't want to take them down, because like this is like a badge of honor. Like somebody like pasted these up in my office. I'm going to keep them up. And so
the dick's got to stay.
If anybody ever came into it was just a thing. And so if anybody ever came into our office, I can imagine, like if your mom or dad walked into the office, you'd be like, oh God, this is embarrassing. Like it was just not a sight to really for the public. And so I remember this one time that I was working in my office and the office PA was coming around with Post-it notes and putting Post-it notes over all the dicks in the office, like all of the internet dick pictures. And I was like, dude, Mike, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? And he's like, the executives from the network are coming by, and they wanted me to cover up all the dicks. So he had to go through the entire office, in every edit bay, and cover up all the like gross pictures that were like all around. So that was Dick House right there.
Oh my God, I'm not surprised. Jesus Christ. Oh geez.
Yeah, it was funny. To give you an idea, Jeff Tremaine, who's the director and kind of the ringleader of the Jackass Circus, in his office, he has a gigantic poster of Chris Pontius, buck naked and only thing on him is basically like a shell covering his cock. It's like a shell. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a piece of wood. It's like a wooden cock. He has a wooden cock on, and there's like a woodpecker on his dick. Like, and that's that's like in the office. Like.
Oh my god. Those dudes are fucking something else. Holy shit.
Yeah, it is classic.
Well, what was?
No, you know what? That's not even the picture that he had. The picture that he has a picture behind his desk that is Chris Pontius buck naked, actually, with a cowboy hat on and like fake kids 6-shooters and like boots, and he's just buck naked, and that's behind his desk. So if you have like a meeting with Jeff, you're sitting at his desk looking at just a straight full frontal nudity shot of Chris Pontius.
Just his dong
cowboy
hanging,
hat with 6-shooters.
Just hanging dong.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really funny. I mean, it was funny to all of us, but I can't imagine how it would look to anybody else going in the office. Like kind of. I mean, if you had to have an important meeting, I mean, how hilarious would that be?
Yeah, it's
trying to sit across from that.
It's a little different in my corporate world. I mean, what's hanging up in the offices? That's hilarious. Oh, dude.
Yeah, definitely different.
Where do you go from fucking Jackass? What's the next move?
My friend Barry, who I told you about, he was working on the show that all of a sudden needed like 50 editors. They must have hired like so many editors. And he's like, hey, you should come over here and try to get like on the night editing crew. They'll leave you alone. You can edit, whatever. And it was this soap opera. This company had bought the rights to all these Mexican soap operas.
Okay.
And so they were making like something crazy, like 300 episodes, and they were all scripted. And he got me in. He like kind of vouched for me over there. And this was straight off of being an assistant. I was like, yeah, I have edited stuff before, I kind of just BS my way into the job. And so they hired me because they were hiring everybody in town. There must have been 100 editors on the show. I mean, when it was all said and done, like it was crazy. And he was kind of like, hey, I'm around. If you need anything, run your cuts by me or whatever, like I'll help you out and, like whatever. This can be like a stepping stone for you. And so I went over there and started basically editing. That was my first editing job. I think the show called Saints and Sinners or something like that.
Was it like a straight up telenovela type of deal?
Yeah, but it was in English. So they had taken all the rights to these shows and made them in English. And they were on some subsidiary of like Fox.
No shit.
And
oh my God.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so one of the shows that I worked on had Bo Derek and Morgan Fairchild in it.
No shit.
And so your job was basically you'd go in and you'd cut scenes, like you'd cut like a 2 or 3 minute scene or whatever. And so you would just roll in and the supervisor would just hand you like, hey, here's like 3 scenes, like work on these tonight. And so one of the scenes that they gave me was a scene with Morgan Fairchild and Bo Derek. And they were having a fight, and they were like throwing cake at each other. And so I like worked on it, like all night and cut it and whatever, and not thinking anything of it. And I go in the next day, and the executive producer's in the office, like the bigwig from the network or whatever. And he's like, I want to see all these scenes or whatever. And Barry comes into my bay and he's like, hey, they're going to want to see this scene, this cake scene that you did with Morgan and Bo or whatever. And I was like, well, I mean, it's not really like done. I wanted you to watch it to see if, there's anything I could do or whatever. He's like, no, don't worry. Just, show them and, whatever. It's fine. And so the executive producer comes into my bay. He's like, all right, press play. And so I sit down and press play and they watch the scene and it was like 3 minutes long or something like that. And it was just silent. I mean, it was just crickets after the scene was done. Yeah. And the guy's like, who the fuck cut this scene? Like, what am I fucking watching? I mean, he just like threw a tantrum. He didn't know that it was me. I think he just thought I was like running the machine or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he's like, we need to fucking recut this scene. This scene is a piece of shit. It's like, whoa. Okay, well, at least he didn't know that it was me that did it. So I didn't lose my job on the spot, but, it was one of those like, oh shit, I better fucking learn a little bit faster here if I'm gonna, be doing this. So that was fun.
Was that pretty early on?
Yeah, that was probably like a week and a half, 2 weeks into it,
Sweet. Hey, man, stiff learning curve, right?
Yeah, I mean, throw them in the fire, So that's how that went. And then I stayed on that for a long time. And the benefit to that job was that there was so much footage and so many scenes that you just plowed through material. And I think it really benefited me, especially like just getting to know the Avid and working my way around and just becoming fast. It made me really fast, And so that definitely helped in the long run. It was actually a great starting job to begin with.
Well,
and then,
how much, like how dialed into the content that you're chopping up did you have to be? Are you just like, all right, we filmed this 3 minutes, separate it, or are you making some decisions on, okay, I'm going to use this camera for here, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, you have to start to get kind of a style and a process down?
So it's a little bit different with every show that you're on, but like on that show where it's scripted, they only shoot so many takes. Like, so they'll shoot maybe 3 or 4 takes, right, of a scene. And they'll have like, one side and then they'll shoot the other side, right? So like if it's a conversation between 2 people, they'll shoot the first person and then they'll, shoot the other angle from the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's 4 takes, there's these things called circle takes. And that's like basically the producers saying, hey, we think this take was like the best one. So you get the script and you see like how many takes there are, and then you see what the circle takes are. So if it's like 3 for one side and 1 for the other side, then you just kind of marry those together to make the scene, you know? And so it's kind of, I feel like in scripted, your options are a little bit less because, you're following the script. Whereas in unscripted, you really are you are creating the scene, from who knows how much footage, they shoot. And you're like, using this part of this sentence and another part of another sentence. And, so you're really like creating it, whereas scripted is more defined, I guess.
Okay. At this point, did it just fit better that it was scripted so you could, you didn't have a lot of choices? It was more or less you were learning how it all worked?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really did benefit building my skill set on the Avid for sure because, you were limited in what you could do. And, it wasn't the greatest show by any means, so at a certain point they were just kind of like, all right, well, whatever, it is what it is, and they just kind of like gave up on the show a little bit.
Dude, man, my first gig out of school, and it was considered a good gig for, being in small town Iowa, but I was producing TV commercials and radio commercials for car dealers. I mean, it was fucking way whack with bad computer animation and, oh, God. So, yeah, at least you're doing something that was a creative aspect. Making commercials was bullshit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the cool thing about that job, too, is that I met, like, all sorts of, because they had hired so many people, I met all these people who, a lot of guys, like, first of all, editing, like, a lot of dudes are editors. There's not a lot of women. But these guys had worked on all sorts of things, like I worked with these guys who were like in their 60s and they had worked on like Cheers and,
oh, wow.
Another guy had worked on Star Trek and like, I mean, just talking to these guys and getting to be friends with them and, picking their brain on editing and stuff like that. It was like another great aspect of that gig was just getting to know, like, getting that experience handed down from those dudes. So, yeah, man, I can't really trash talk that show other than the dude telling me that my cut sucked,
Well, after you moved on from the soap opera, name drop, where did you go from there? Talk about, you don't have to go into a lot of details, but name off a few shows that you worked on, because I want to still get to the bakery, but we got about, maybe 10, 15 minutes left in the conversation. But I know you worked you worked on a lot of shows that people would recognize, so name off a few shows that you did some editing on.
Yeah, I worked on, that's the thing about editing is that it's just, after that, it's just, you're kind of hustling for the next gig. And some gigs lasted 6 weeks, some gigs lasted, a couple of months, or like 6 months. And what I didn't understand at that point was all these older guys were staying on this show. And we were all the younger guys were like, what's next? I got to find something else because this is dead. You know, like
Yeah.
they don't care about the show. Like nobody cares. And it was a union gig, and all these older guys were like, "Screw that! I'm staying here." You know, like I'm just gonna like ride this thing out until the very bitter end.
Okay.
And so we're all jumping off and getting other shows and stuff like that. And so I went on to do a lot of different things. Like you would just work 6 weeks on this job or that job. But after that, I worked on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And I did an episode of Dirty Jobs. And then eventually I worked on Top Chef. And then this last show that I've been working on for 15 seasons is Ridiculousness on MTV, which has been a long, long run. And in between, I worked on a lot of crappy shows I don't even remember the names of. Some shows didn't have names, you know, like they were never going to air, you know, stuff on cable and Discovery and, you know, like all these shows are just like,
Oh,
whatever.
I see.
You
I
keep
have
them together as much as you can.
I have your IMDb up. You know, we talked ahead of time to see how updated it was, but you edited some show in 2010 called Airplane Repo.
Yeah, that was one of those Discovery shows that just, I think they just buried it. I mean, it was only 3 episodes, but it was, I don't know. It was like the show about this guy who would go and repo private jets, basically. And it was
nuts.
so weird because it was after like FAA put all these regulations in, and there was all these legal problems with the show because it looked like he was like just jumping the fence and going to steal a plane, and it was like, this doesn't really add up. You know, they didn't want to portray that on TV, so I think they did the 3 episodes and then bailed. But I didn't do that from scratch. I came in and kind of polished it, like finished it, you know, so that it was ready for air. But that was one of those just, I don't know. I don't know where that show went. But it actually led to me working on the Dirty Jobs episode that I did, which was like a special. It was like a, what's it called when you put like a bunch of pieces of different shows together? I guess like not a best of, but, you know.
It says Dirty Holidays.
Yeah, it was like all segments that they had already shot in other shows, and then we took them out of those shows and made it into like a special.
Okay.
And so it was all a holiday special. And that was a lot of fun because, you know, I got to watch all of like the, you know, old Dirty Jobs episodes. And I don't know if you remember that show, but
yeah, Mike Rowe.
And yeah, and it was great. And so my funny story on that show is my producer, I had this bay where the Avid was against the wall and the door was behind my back. So anytime anybody walked in, I would have to turn around and, you know, be like, oh, hey, what's up? And so I hear the door open, fucking Mike Rowe. And Mike Rowe walks in my bay and he's like, hey, dude, what's going on? What are we doing? And he just sat down. And I was just like, dude, what is going on here? I'm just like watching him on the TV. And then all of a sudden he's in my bay. And he starts eating like my snacks. I had like some pretzels and shit there. And like he was like eating my snacks and like just chatting me up. And he was just hilarious. So he admitted like after like towards the end of the conversation, he was like, hey, you know, Dave, the producer, he's like, he put me up to coming in here, but hey man, good luck. It looks great. You know, like whatever, you know, see you around. And I was like, all right, cool. So that was a little weird, surreal moment because you don't ever, you know, you edit these shows and see these people all the time and then you never meet them, you know? So it's always weird to see people, you know, out and about or like in the real world, basically. It's kind of surreal.
It's not a surprise it's him, you know, Mr. Man of the People and all.
Yeah, he was super cool, man. Yeah, and he chatted me up for like 20 or 30 minutes and ate all my pretzels, all of them.
Nice, thanks, Mike.
But I had no snacks for the rest of the day.
Did you say you're still working on the show Ridiculousness?
Yes.
All right. Take us. We got about, 10 minutes left. I want to wrap up to kind of almost catch up where you're at. But you decide, you and the wife, you're like, we're leaving LA. We're going to go to Nashville. I'm going to still do some of this stuff, but we're also going to start a bakery. How the fuck does any of this start going down?
Yeah, I was really lucky. We kind of just wanted to move back just to kind of get out of the grind of LA and just kind of move back, be closer to family and start a family of our own and stuff like that. So I was working on Ridiculousness at the time, and I kind of went to them to the bigwigs, and I was like, hey, my wife and I decided to move to Nashville, and so I'm going to be leaving. And they were super cool, and I just kind of had just done a great job on the show, I guess. And so they kind of offered me to do it remotely. So they were like, why don't we just try to keep you on the show and just do it remotely? And I was like, all right, yeah, let's do it. I think it's totally possible. You know, I'll come out and get media and go back and edit, and then, you know, we can FaceTime or whatever with the producers and stuff. And it's a show that's in a place where it's pretty formulaic. There's not a ton of footage. So, and I've been doing it for, 10 seasons at that point.
Okay.
So we just did that. They were cool enough to let me try to do it remotely, and it's worked out. I mean, it just keeps going. They picked it up a couple of times since I've been out here, and so I've been in Nashville for almost 3 years and working on it the whole time. So that's just one of those, like, I got lucky things, you know. Like,
yeah. Here's my question without getting too dorky as far as the tech goes, because obviously, you know, we know video files are not tiny. How do they get you the files? Is it all cloud-based, or do they just start overnighting hard drives to you?
At first, when I first started, I had this producer that it really was beneficial for me to be there and just kind of walk through the show, like towards the end. Like when you lock a show, it's basically like that's it. It's the final watch down, any tweaks or whatever. And then it's finished. It goes to mix and color and stuff like that. But it was beneficial for me to be out there. So the first year I did it, I was probably in LA every like 3 weeks, just watching the showdown with them and in person and doing that. And so when I was there, I would just copy everything onto a drive and bring the drives back and forth with me. And then at a certain point, we just determined it was like, you know what, you don't really need to come out here anymore. I think that we got this down. Like, I think it works.
Yeah.
And you can just stay in Nashville if you want, you know, like, and just do it from there. And so then our hurdle was, how do we get all this media? Because it is about, per show, it's probably about, 70 gigs, maybe 80 gigs.
Jesus.
It's kind of a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But what we do is I have a program that remotely controls their computers there. They're all on a system that's like in-house on a server.
Okay.
And so what I do is I log into one of the computers and I can copy everything from the server. So that's how we do it now. And it takes some time. It's not super fast. So what I do is I usually do it on the weekends when nobody's in the office. So the Wi-Fi is working pretty fast there. And I just copy everything and let it go overnight. And by the next day I have my show here in Nashville. And so that's the plan that we do now. That's what we do now. So it works, man. We figured it out. And since then, there have been 2 other editors that kind of work remotely, but they're in LA. They just work from home. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, I kind of started this kind of remote work thing, and a couple people have followed my lead, and they're cool with it. They're just like, look, it's in a spot where the editors know what they're doing. We know what show it is. You know, like, it's not, we don't have to have producers in your bay all the time. You know, so it's much easier now.
And that's kind of the trend anyway, even in the corporate world, is working remote. Like, if you don't have to be there, why the fuck be there? You know, if you don't have to.
Yeah.
So
I mean, dude, everybody would do it if they could. You know what I mean? It's like everybody would do it if they could. But, you know, a lot of people have to be there in the office. But fortunately for the editors, we don't really need to be there.
Oh, nice.
It worked out. And I love the show. It's been great. It's been so much fun working on the show. And those guys have been awesome to me. And aside from Jackass and Wild Boys and stuff like that, it's right up there. I mean, it's right up there with that. It's been the same level of fun. You know, we've had a good time. It's always fun to make comedy. You know what I mean? It's hilarious. It makes you laugh. You know. I
could not tell you the last time I watched anything on fucking MTV. I don't even know what channel it is.
And it's one of those things that they play like all the time. So there'll be like huge blocks of it. It'll just go for like all day long.
Really?
And I think that I thought that we have almost 500 episodes.
Holy shit. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So
Jesus.
They just dig into the archives and just run them. Yeah. No,
wow.
It's crazy.
So it's got,
they love it.
Got some replay value.
And totally. And when I was in LA, I would always tell people, oh, I'm working on the show Ridiculousness. And people would be like, what's that? Never even heard of it. And then when I moved here, you know, I would say, oh, you know, I work on a TV show. And they're like, what TV show? And I would say Ridiculousness. And people would be like, I love that show. Oh, my God, I watch it when I'm at the gym. Or, like, I watch it with my kids. And, like, I'm now living among the demographic, I guess, like all the people that watch the show, you know.
You're amongst
that's kind of cool.
You're walking amongst the people now.
That's right.
Oh, man. Well, I have to check it out now just out of pure curiosity. But here's the deal. We're pretty much at our limit here, and we didn't even get into the bakery. But the good news is, which is cool, though. It's my show, so I decide what happens, right? So we'll have to have you back on to talk bakery shit. And
oh, man. Yeah, that would be cool.
Because I'm curious to see or hear a little bit more. Well, now I know a little bit more because I talk to you on a regular basis, but I think you have an interesting story of how you balance both kind of jobs, because the starting your own business thing, that's gotta fucking suck. It just has to.
Yeah, it's a grind. It's definitely a grind, but I think on this iteration of the business, because we had a business in LA too that was a retail storefront bakery, and we had absolutely no idea what we were doing, and managed to keep it open for like almost 3 years. And then it kind of went kaput. And so we kind of rethought it and kind of simplified it and brought it here. And it's doing much better here. It's like a much better business that we have now than we ever had in LA. And I think that was beneficial to do the first one, just to kind of be like, what are we doing? You know, like I would be like reading books about starting a business and, you know, like doing all this stuff. And it's kind of just trial by error, you know, like, just learn it as you go, man. Sink or swim, you know?
And I can imagine the storefront, that's got to be extra level pain in the ass. Plus California, it couldn't be cheap. So,
yeah, I mean, it was definitely tough. But you know, it's been my wife's kind of brainchild, and she's been behind it and just really grinding. I used to, my pep talk to her was always that, hey, you're the Michael Jordan of pastries, all right? you can do anything. We can do this because you're the Michael Jordan of pastries, and she is really good. She has created some amazing sweets, cookies, and confections and things like that. So I'm impressed.
I wouldn't know. You haven't sent me anything.
Oh, well, I mean, now I have to send you something.
Exactly. I'll take whatever.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Well, let's get you back on and talk about the bakery. What's the name of the bakery again and the website, just so it's fresh in everyone's mind? It's
theshortbreadshop.com, and it's SHOP, not the old English SHOPPE. Don't do that. We don't do that.
No, fuck that.
We do the straight up American SHOP, theshortbreadshop.com.
Damn right.
Really,
America.
Good cookies. That's right, America.
Cool. Well, I definitely appreciate the chat today. We'll be in touch, and we'll be talking baked goods next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. See ya.
All right. Later.
Thank you for listening to Middle Age Crazy, the show that proves being an adult doesn't have to suck. Brought to you by moonsaltmusic.info. Underground and independent hip-hop for the old heads. Free downloads available now. All show inquiries can be sent to middleagecrazypod@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at middleagepod. Call us at 515-478-3412. Ask for Janice. Middle Age Crazy is a Greg Valentine and Clarence J. Washington production.